Celine Marlowe stood outside the library door in her wedding dress, ice flooding her veins as she heard her fiancé's voice drift through the crack. Once the ceremony's done, we stage the accident. Make it look like Varick's crew did it. Bride caught in crossfire, tragic. Her father will have no choice but to back our move against him. Laughter followed, cold, casual laughter about her murder. Her hands shook so hard the bouquet dropped, white roses scattering across marble like bones. She had two choices: walk down that aisle to her death, or run to the one man in the city dangerous enough to believe her, the crime boss being framed for her murder. If you're hooked, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far Celine's story travels. Now, let's begin. Yamt. The morning of Celine Marlowe's wedding began the way her entire life had begun, with other people making decisions about her body, her future, her worth. Hold still, her mother snapped, yanking the corset tighter. You're fidgeting like a child. Celine wasn't fidgeting, she was trying to breathe, but contradicting her mother had never been an option, so she pressed her lips together and stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror. The woman looking back was a stranger, pale skin dusted with powder she hadn't chosen, lips painted a shade of red her mother had selected, hair swept into an elaborate updo that made her neck feel exposed and vulnerable. The dress was beautiful, she could admit that much. Ivory silk that pooled around her feet like water, delicate lace sleeves that covered her arms to the wrist, a neckline that her mother had deemed appropriate for a Marlowe bride. Everything about this moment was designed to look perfect. Everything except Celine herself, who felt like she might shatter if anyone touched her wrong. There, her mother said, stepping back to examine her work. You'll do. You'll do. Not, you look beautiful. Not, I'm proud of you. Just the clinical assessment of a woman inspecting merchandise before sale. Because that's what this was, really. A transaction. Celine Marlowe, 23 years old, daughter of Marcus Marlowe, a man whose legitimate shipping business barely concealed the empire of bribes, extortion, and strategic violence beneath it, was being married off to unite two powerful families. Her opinion on the matter had never been requested. I need a moment, Celine said quietly. Before we go downstairs. Her mother's jaw tightened. The guests are waiting. Just a moment, please. Something in her voice must have registered because her mother's expression softened fractionally. 5 minutes? Don't muss your makeup. The door closed and Celine was alone. She walked to the window, careful not to step on her train, and looked out over the Marlowe estate. Manicured gardens stretched in every direction, a display of wealth and control. Nothing grew here that hadn't been deliberately planted. Nothing existed that didn't serve a purpose. Just like her. She'd met her fiancé, Julian Cross, exactly 4 times before today. Each meeting had been carefully orchestrated, dinner at expensive restaurants with both sets of parents present, conversation guided by her father's strategic interests, and Julian's smooth agreement to everything proposed. Julian was handsome in the way expensive things were handsome. Well-tailored, well-groomed, well-practiced at saying the right words. Celine had watched him across those dinner tables and felt nothing. Not attraction, not repulsion, just a sort of numb acceptance that this was her life now. Her mother had married the same way. Her grandmother before that. This was what Marlowe women did. They smiled, they obeyed, they produced heirs to continue the legacy. She'd tried to convince herself it would be fine. Julian seemed kind enough in his distant way. He didn't raise his voice, didn't seem cruel. Maybe kindness wasn't love, but it was better than cruelty. Maybe she could build a life on that foundation, however cold. A knock on the door made her turn. Miss Marlowe? One of the staff, a young woman whose name Celine had never been told. Your father wants to see you in the library before the ceremony. Celine's stomach nodded. Her father never requested her presence for anything important. She was a pawn, not a player. Did he say why? No, miss. He just said to come now before you go downstairs. The library was on the east side of the house, down a corridor she rarely used. Celine gathered her skirts and followed the staff member through hallways decorated with art. Her father had bought not because he liked it, but because owning it demonstrated power. Everything in Marcus Marlowe's world was a demonstration of power. The staff member stopped outside the library door. then hurried away as if she didn't want to be seen lingering. Celine reached for the handle, then froze. Voices, coming from inside. Not her father's voice, Julian's. Exactly as we discussed, Julian was saying. The ceremony goes forward, all very traditional. Then during the reception, we stage the incident. Another voice responded, lower, harder to make out. Not her father. Celine's hand hovered over the door handle. Every instinct in her body screamed that she should knock, announce herself, follow the rules she'd been taught since childhood. Good girls didn't eavesdrop. Good girls didn't pry into men's business. But something in Julian's tone, something cold and clinical, made her stay silent. She leaned closer, her ear nearly touching the wood. Varick's crew has been moving shipments through the docks every Thursday, Julian continued. We make it look like they hit the reception, crossfire, tragic accident. The bride gets caught in it. Nobody's fault, just wrong place, wrong time. The bride. He was talking about her. Celine's vision tunneled. She pressed her palm against the wall to stay upright. Marcus will be devastated, of course, Julian said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. Losing his only daughter on her wedding day. He'll want blood, and we'll give him a target, Damien Varick. Marcus already hates the bastard for encroaching on his territory. This'll give him the excuse he needs to move against Varick with everything he has. By the time the smoke clears, we'll have eliminated our biggest rival and consolidated Marcus's operations under our control. And Marlowe won't suspect you, the other voice asked. Why would he? I'll be the grieving widower, the wronged husband. I'll stand beside him while we burn Varick's empire to the ground. And when Marcus is too broken to lead anymore, I'll be right there to take over. Julian laughed, a sound like ice cracking. The old man's been useful, but he's weak, sentimental. This organization needs someone willing to make hard calls. What about the girl? She suspect anything? Celine? Julian's laugh was crueler this time. That mouse! She barely speaks above a whisper. I've met houseplants with more spine. She'll walk down that aisle like a lamb to slaughter and never see it coming. The words hit like physical blows. Celine stumbled backward, her hip catching the edge of a side table. A vase wobbled, and she grabbed it just before it fell, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She needed to move, needed to run, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. Think. If she stayed, she died. Julian would go through with this. She could hear it in his voice, that casual certainty of a man who'd already decided another person's life was expendable. The ceremony would happen, the reception would happen, and then Julian's people would storm in with guns, and Celine would be caught in the crossfire, and her father would never know his daughter's husband had orchestrated her murder. She couldn't go to her father. Even if she told him what she'd heard, would he believe her? Julian had spent months making himself indispensable, positioning himself as the perfect heir to the Marlowe empire. And Celine was just the quiet daughter who'd never given her father a reason to trust her judgment on anything. The voices inside the library shifted, footsteps approaching the door. Celine ran. She didn't think, didn't plan, just gathered her skirts and fled down the corridor, away from the library, away from the wedding that was supposed to start in less than an hour. Her heels clicked against marble, too loud, and she kicked them off without stopping, leaving them abandoned in the hallway. A staff member rounded the corner ahead. Miss Marlowe, are you? Celine pushed past her, through a side door that led to the gardens. The grass was wet with morning dew, soaking through her stockings, and the hem of her dress collected dirt and leaves as she ran. She didn't care. Nothing mattered except getting away, getting somewhere Julian couldn't reach her, getting… Where? She stopped at the edge of the estate, hidden behind a row of hedges, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Where could she go? Her father's house wasn't safe. She had no money of her own, no car, no friends outside the carefully curated circle her family controlled. Julian's people would find her within hours. Unless… The thought arrived fully formed, terrible and desperate, and completely insane. Damien Varick. The name everyone in her father's house spoke with hatred. The rival boss who'd been steadily taking territory from the Marlowe operation, who'd had the audacity to refuse Marcus's offers of cooperation, who ran his empire with a reputation for brutal efficiency. The man Julian was planning to frame for her murder. If anyone in this city would believe that Julian Cross was capable of killing his own bride to consolidate power, it would be Varick. He knew how this world worked, knew that people were chess pieces, that sentiment was weakness, that murder was just another tool. And more importantly, if Julian succeeded in framing him for Celine's death, Varric would be the one to suffer. Her father would move against him with everything he had. Varric had every reason to want Julian's plan to fail. Celine looked down at herself. Wedding dress filthy, feet bare, hair coming loose from its pins. She looked like exactly what she was, a terrified runaway bride. She looked insane, but staying was death. Running without a plan was death, and going to the police in a city where her father owned half the force was worse than useless. Damien Varric was her only option. She just had to get to him before Julian realized she was gone. Celine had never stolen a car before. She'd never stolen anything before. But the keys to one of the staff vehicles were hanging in the kitchen, and the cook was busy preparing food for a wedding reception that would never happen. And Celine's entire life had already imploded so spectacularly that Grand Theft Auto barely registered. She drove with shaking hands, unfamiliar with the vehicle's size, taking corners too wide and braking too hard. She'd only had her license for a year. Her father had seen no reason for her to drive when there were people to drive her, and she'd never gone anywhere without permission. Damien Varric's headquarters were across the city, in a district her father had told her never to visit. The buildings here were older, repurposed warehouses and industrial spaces that had been converted into something harder to define. Legitimate businesses operated here, but everyone knew what lay beneath. She found the address she'd overheard her father mention once during an argument, a 4-story building with dark windows and a reinforced door. 2 men stood outside, both armed, both watching her approach with expressions that went from confusion to alarm as she climbed out of the car. She must look completely unhinged. Wedding dress destroyed, face probably streaked with tears she didn't remember crying, approaching a crime boss's headquarters alone. Good. Let them think she was crazy. Crazy was honest right now. "I need to see Damien Varric," she said, her voice barely carrying. The guards exchanged looks. One of them stepped forward. "Miss, you need to leave." "Please." She hated how her voice shook. "It's about Julian Cross. I have information about—" "Miss Marlowe?" The voice came from the doorway. A woman stepped out, late 30s, dark hair pulled back, wearing a perfectly tailored suit. "I'm Elena Torres, Mr. Varric's head of security. You should come inside." Celine didn't question the small mercy. She followed Elena through the door, acutely aware of the guards falling into formation behind her. The interior was nothing like her father's house. No pretense at domesticity here. This was a workspace, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. People moved through the halls with purpose, most of them armed, all of them watching Celine with unconcealed curiosity. Elena led her to an elevator. "Does your father know you're here?" "No." Celine's throat was dry. "Nobody knows. I ran." Elena didn't respond, but something shifted in her expression. Not sympathy exactly, but recognition. They rode up in silence. The elevator opened onto a top-floor office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, the late morning light streaming in to illuminate a space that was both functional and strangely beautiful. Books lined one wall. A desk dominated the center. Dark wood, clean lines, nothing decorative about it. And behind the desk sat Damien Varric. Celine had seen photographs, of course, surveillance photos her father's people had taken, grainy images that captured the broad strokes but none of the details. They hadn't prepared her for the reality of him. He was younger than she'd expected, early 30s maybe, with dark hair and eyes that tracked her movement with the kind of focus that made her feel dissected. He wore a black shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, no pretense at the expensive suits her father favored. Everything about him was economical, controlled, dangerous. He looked at her the way a predator looks at something wounded, assessing whether it's prey or threat. "Miss Marlowe," he said. His voice was quiet, but it filled the room anyway. "You're supposed to be getting married right about now." Celine's legs finally gave out. She grabbed the back of a chair to stay upright. "I can't. I heard Julian is going to sit." It wasn't a request. She sat. Damien gestured, and Elena moved to the door. "Give us the room, but stay close." Elena left without a word. The door clicked shut. Damien leaned back in his chair, studying Celine with an intensity that made her skin crawl. You ran from your own wedding to come here. Either you're the bravest woman I've ever met or the most desperate. Which is it? Desperate, Celine whispered. At least you're honest. He stood, moving around the desk with a predator's grace. Start talking. Why are you here? This was it. The moment where she either convinced him or failed and died, because going back to her father's house wasn't an option anymore. Celine forced herself to meet his eyes. Julian Cross is planning to kill me. Today. At the reception. He's going to make it look like your people did it, so my father will go to war with you. Julian wants to use my death to eliminate you and take over my father's operation. Damien's expression didn't change. That's quite an accusation. I heard him. The words came faster now, tumbling over each other. In the library, he was talking to someone, I don't know who, about staging it during the reception. Crossfire. Making it look like your crew hit the wedding. He said my father would be too broken to lead after losing me, and Julian would step in. You heard this conversation, Damien said slowly, and instead of telling your father, you came here. My father wouldn't believe me. Selena's hands twisted in her lap, ruining the silk. He thinks I'm... Julian called me a mouse, said I barely speak above a whisper, and he's right. My father's never listened to me about anything important. Why would he start now? Damien moved closer, and Celine fought every instinct that told her to flinch back. So you came to me. The man your family has spent the last 2 years trying to destroy. The man Julian is planning to frame for your murder. You came here and hoped I'd, what? Believe you? Protect you? I came here because you're the only person in this city who has a reason to want Julian's plan to fail. Celine's voice steadied slightly. If he succeeds, you're the one who pays. My father will come after you with everything he has. You'll be fighting a war on false grounds, defending yourself against a crime you didn't commit. I hoped, you might see the value in stopping that before it starts. Silence. Damien studied her for a long moment, and Celine couldn't read his expression at all. Then he laughed, a short, sharp sound without humor. You're smarter than they give you credit for, he said. Coming here was a calculated risk, probably the only move you had left. Does that mean you believe me? It means I'm listening. Keep talking. Tell me everything you heard, every word, every detail. So Celine told him. She recounted the conversation as precisely as she could remember it, fighting through the fear that wanted to cloud her memory. Julian's voice discussing her death like a business transaction. The plan to stage the attack. The timeline. The goal of using her murder to justify war. Damien listened without interrupting, his face giving nothing away. When she finished, he walked to the windows and stood with his back to her, looking out over the city. Julian Cross, he said finally, is smarter than your father. Marcus Marlowe built his empire on old connections and brute force. Julian understands that the game has changed. Consolidation. Strategic positioning. He's been working toward this for months. Getting close to your father, making himself indispensable, preparing to take over. You knew? Celine's voice rose slightly. You knew Julian was... I knew he was ambitious. I didn't know he'd be stupid enough to murder his own bride. Damien turned back to face her. That's a risk. Even if the frame job works, even if Marcus comes after me instead of looking at Julian, there's still the chance someone notices. Someone asks questions. He doesn't think anyone will, Celine said quietly, because nobody thinks I matter. I'm just the quiet daughter, the obedient bride. Nobody will question my death because nobody thinks I'm worth questioning. Something flickered across Damien's face, something that might have been anger, though she couldn't tell if it was directed at her or at the situation. Elena, he said, not raising his voice. The door opened immediately. Elena stepped inside. Sir? Get Marcus Marlowe on the phone. Tell him his daughter is here and she's safe. Celine's heart lurched. What? No, I told you, he won't... I'm not sending you back. Damien's tone was firm. But if you disappear right before your wedding, Marcus is going to assume I took you. That plays right into Julian's hands. Instead of framing me for your death, he'll just accuse me of kidnapping you. Either way, I'm the target. He was right. Celine saw it immediately, hated that she hadn't thought of it herself. What do I tell him? She asked.
The truth, that you overheard something that scared you, that you came here because you didn't know where else to go. You don't have to tell him what you heard, not yet. Just that you're safe and you need time. Elena was already dialing. She held out the phone. Celine took it with shaking hands. It rang twice before her father answered. Who is this? Dad, it's me. Silence. Then Celine, where the hell are you? The wedding is... Everyone's waiting. I know. I'm sorry. She looked at Damien, who nodded. I'm at Damien Varick's headquarters. The explosion of sound from the other end made Celine pull the phone away from her ear. She couldn't make out individual words, just rage. Damien plucked the phone from her hands. Marcus, it's Varick. Your daughter is unharmed and here of her own accord. If you want to discuss this, we can do it civilly, or I can hang up and you can keep screaming at the dial tone. Celine couldn't hear her father's response, but the tone shifted. She came to me, Damien said calmly. Showed up in her wedding dress about 20 minutes ago. Said she overheard something that made her afraid, and she didn't know where else to go. I'm calling as a courtesy to let you know she's safe. More talking from the other end. I'm not holding her hostage, Marcus. She's free to leave anytime she wants. But she seems pretty convinced that going back right now isn't safe. Damien's eyes met Celine's. Maybe instead of yelling at me, you should ask your daughter what she's afraid of. A pause. Then Damien held the phone out to Celine. She took it, her hand steadier this time. Dad? What the hell is going on? Her father's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. You embarrass me, embarrass our family, on what's supposed to be the most important day of... Julian is planning to kill me. The words came out flat, emotionless. Celine was too tired to dress them up. Silence. What did you say? I heard him, in the library. He was talking to someone about staging an attack during the reception, making it look like Varick's people did it. Using my death to give you an excuse to go after Varick, then taking over when you were too broken to lead anymore. Celine, that's... Julian would never... I heard him, Dad. He called me a mouse. Said I'd walk down the aisle like a lamb to slaughter and never see it coming. Her voice cracked. He's going to kill me. Today. And he's going to make you blame Varick for it. Let me talk to Julian, her father said. There's been a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. I know what I heard. Celine looked at Damien, who was watching her with that same unreadable expression. I'm staying here. Where Julian can't get to me. If you want to talk, we can talk. But I'm not going back. Celine. She hung up. Her hands were shaking again. She set the phone down carefully on Damien's desk and waited for the world to finish falling apart. Damien took the phone back from Elena. He'll come here, probably within the hour. Will he bring Julian? Celine asked. Maybe. Depends on how smart Julian is. Damien moved back to his desk, pulled out a drawer, and withdrew what looked like a recording device. Did Julian mention any names, his contact, anyone else involved? No, just he talked about your shipments at the docks, Thursday shipments. He knew the timing. Damien's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That information isn't public. Someone on my crew is feeding him intelligence. I'm sorry, Celine said automatically. Don't apologize. You just gave me a piece of the puzzle I've been missing. He sat down, gesturing for her to stay seated as well. Marcus is going to push hard for you to come home. He's going to say you misunderstood, that you're emotional, that wedding day jitters made you paranoid. I know. Can you hold your ground? The question surprised her. Celine had spent her entire life being told what to do, where to go, who to be. Holding her ground had never been an option. But she'd run from her own wedding. She'd driven across the city in a stolen car. She'd walked into a crime boss's headquarters and demanded help. Maybe she was capable of more than anyone thought. Yes, she said, I can hold my ground. Damien's expression shifted slightly, something that might have been approval. Good, because the next few hours are going to determine whether you live or die, and I need you sharp. Marcus Marlowe arrived with an entourage. Celine watched from Damien's office window as 3 black SUVs pulled up outside. Her father emerged from the center vehicle, flanked by bodyguards. Julian wasn't with him,
Smart, she supposed. Coming here would look like guilt. Stay where you are, Damien told her. Let me handle the initial conversation. He descended to meet Marcus in the ground floor conference room. Selene stayed in the office with Elena, watching the city and trying not to think about what was happening below. Mr. Varick will keep you safe, Elena said quietly. Why? The question escaped before Selene could stop it. Why would he help me? I'm nobody to him. Elena's smile was slight. You gave him information he needed. That makes you valuable. And Mr. Varick has a rule about women and children. They're not acceptable targets. If Julian Cross is planning to kill you, that makes you someone worth protecting. It wasn't reassurance exactly, but it was something. 15 minutes later, Damien returned with Marcus in tow. Celine's father looked older than she remembered, gray at his temples she hadn't noticed before, lines around his eyes deepening as he took in her appearance. Selene, he said, and his voice was gentler than she'd expected. Tell me what happened. So she told him again, every word of the conversation she'd overheard, every detail she could remember. Marcus listened with the same unreadable expression Damien had worn, his face giving nothing away. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Julian has been nothing but loyal, he said finally. He's helped us recover lost territory, strengthened our position. Why would he risk everything to... Because he wants to be everything, Damien interrupted. Marcus, think. Julian doesn't want to work for you. He wants to replace you. And your daughter's death gives him the perfect opportunity. Emotional leverage to push you toward a war you can't win, and grief that'll make you vulnerable to manipulation. You're saying this because it benefits you, Marcus shot back. If I believe Selene, I turn on Julian instead of you. I'm saying this because it's true. Damien leaned against his desk, arms crossed. You want proof? Fine. Have your people look into Julian's background. Real investigation, not the surface-level check you did before approving the marriage. See what you find. Marcus's expression darkened. I know my own son-in-law. You know what he's shown you. That's not the same thing. Selene found her voice. Dad, please. I'm not asking you to take action against Julian. Not yet. I'm just asking you to consider that what I heard might be true. That's all. Her father looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. You understand what you're accusing him of? Yes. If you're wrong, I'm not wrong. Celine's voice was steady. I know what I heard. Marcus rubbed his face, suddenly looking exhausted. The wedding is canceled. I'll announce that you fell ill, needed to postpone. That buys us time. And Julian? Damien asked. I'll talk to him. Feel him out. See if Celine's accusations hold water. Marcus's eyes hardened as he looked at Damien. But my daughter is coming home. She's not staying here. No, Selene said. Both men turned to stare at her. I'm not going home, she continued. If Julian suspects I know about his plan, home isn't safe. Here is safe. Mr. Varick has every reason to keep me alive. Selene, you can't seriously... I'm staying. She looked at her father, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. You can post guards if you want. You can check on me every day. But I'm not going back to that house until I'm sure Julian can't get to me. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Celine's expression must have stopped him, because he turned to Damien instead. If anything happens to her, nothing will happen to her, Damien said flatly. You have my word. Your word means shit to me. Then consider it a business arrangement. Your daughter's safety ensures you don't come after me on false pretenses. We both benefit. The two men stared at each other, and Selene could feel the weight of old hatred between them. Years of territorial disputes, of violence, of mutual destruction. Finally, Marcus nodded once. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll discuss this further. He left without saying goodbye to Selene. When the door closed, she let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. You just made an enemy of your own father, Damien observed. I made a choice, Selene corrected. That's different. For the first time since she'd arrived, Damien smiled, just slightly, just enough to soften the hard lines of his face. Welcome to my world, Miss Marlowe, he said. Try not to get killed. Selene spent her first night in Damien Varick's headquarters in a guest room that felt more like a cell. Not because it was locked, the door opened freely, but because leaving felt impossible. Where would she go? Back to her father's house where Julian might still have access. Out into the city with no money, no plan, nowhere to hide? She sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing the ruined wedding dress because she had nothing else, and tried to process the fact that her entire life had collapsed in less than 12 hours. A knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Elena stood in the doorway, arms full of clothing. Thought you might want something more practical to wear. The clothes were simple, jeans, a sweater, underwear still in packaging. Celine took them with hands that felt clumsy and strange. Thank you. Bathroom's through there. Elena nodded toward a door Celine hadn't noticed. I'll have someone bring up food. You should eat. Celine wasn't hungry, but she nodded anyway. When Elena left, she locked herself in the bathroom and finally peeled off the wedding dress. The fabric was stained beyond repair, grass and dirt ground into the hem, one of the lace sleeves torn. She left it in a heap on the floor and stepped into the shower, letting scalding water wash away the carefully applied makeup, the hairspray that had held her updo in place, the perfume her mother had insisted on. When she emerged 20 minutes later, she looked like herself again, pale, small, forgettable. The girl Julian had called a mouse, except she wasn't that girl anymore, was she? That girl would have walked down the aisle, would have smiled and obeyed and died without ever knowing what hit her. Celine dressed in the borrowed clothes and braided her wet hair, then forced herself to eat the sandwich someone had left on a tray outside her door. She managed 3 bites before her stomach rebelled. Sleep was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Julian's voice discussing her murder with that casual, clinical tone. She paced the small room until exhaustion made her dizzy, then sat by the window and watched the city lights blur in her vision. Somewhere out there, Julian was probably spinning this to her father. Poor Celine, always so nervous, wedding jitters turning into full-blown paranoia. She'd probably misheard something innocent and blown it out of proportion. Marcus should bring her home, get her to a doctor, maybe consider postponing the wedding until she was more stable. Would her father believe it? Would he want to believe it? Because accepting the truth meant accepting that he'd nearly handed his daughter over to a killer? Dawn came slowly. Celine watched the sky shift from black to gray to pale gold, and somewhere during that transformation, she made a decision. If she was going to survive this, she needed to stop being the frightened girl who ran. She needed to become someone who fought back. She just had no idea how. Damien found her in his office at 7 in the morning. Celine had wandered down after giving up on sleep, drawn by the floor-to-ceiling windows and the strange comfort of the space. She was standing at the glass, watching the city wake up, when he walked in. "You're up early," he said. Celine turned. He looked like he hadn't slept either, same clothes as yesterday, shadows under his eyes that suggested he'd been working through the night. "Couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Understandable." He moved to his desk, set down a folder thick with papers. "Your father called 4 times last night. Julian called 6. Her stomach dropped. What did Julian say? That you're fragile, that this whole situation has traumatized you, that he's worried about your mental state. He wants to come here personally to talk to you. Damien's expression was flat. I told him no. He'll convince my father I'm unstable. Maybe. But Marcus also asked me to run a background check on Julian, so he's at least willing to consider you might be telling the truth. That was something. Not much, but something. Damien gestured to the chair across from his desk. Sit. We need to talk strategy. Celine sat, folding her hands in her lap to stop them from shaking. Right now you're safe because Julian doesn't know what you know, Damien began. He thinks you ran because of wedding jitters, maybe overheard something that scared you but didn't understand it. That gives us a window to work with. How long? A day, maybe 2, before he realizes you're a real threat. Once that happens, he'll move to contain you, either by convincing Marcus you're having a breakdown or by more direct means. More direct means. Another way of saying he'd try to kill her. So what do we do? Celine asked. We prove he's planning to betray your father. Hard evidence, not just your word against his. Damien opened the folder, spreading papers across his desk. I had my people pull everything we have on Julian Cross. Financial records, phone logs, known associates. It's not much yet, but it's a start. Celine leaned forward, scanning the documents. Most of it meant nothing to her, numbers and dates and names she didn't recognize. But one thing caught her eye. He's been meeting with Thomas Garrett, she said, pointing to a series of phone records. You know Garrett? He works for my father, head of security for the dock operations. Celine's mind raced, pulling up fragments of overheard conversations from family dinners. My father trusts him completely. He's been with the organization for 15 years. Damien's eyes sharpened. If Julian has Garrett feeding him information, that explains how he knows about my Thursday shipments. Garrett would have access to your father's security protocols, schedules, everything. Can you prove it? Not yet. But if we can catch Garrett passing information to Julian, that's leverage. Damien pulled another document from the stack. There's something else. Julian's been moving money, small amounts spread across multiple accounts, but it adds up. He's building a war chest. For after my father's gone, Celine said quietly. He's planning to take over the organization, so he needs resources independent of my father's control. Exactly. Damien studied her with that same intense focus. You're good at this, seeing patterns. I've spent my whole life watching people talk business at dinner tables. Nobody ever bothered to send me away because nobody thought I was listening. The bitterness in her voice surprised her. Turns out being invisible has some advantages. Use that, Damien said. You know these people, how they think, how they operate. That's valuable. Before Celine could respond, Elena appeared in the doorway. Marcus Marlowe is here, with Julian Cross. Celine's heart stopped. Damien's expression didn't change. How many guards? 4, they're in the conference room. Tell them I'll be down in 5 minutes. When Elena left, Damien turned to Celine. You don't have to see Julian if you don't want to. Yes, I do. Celine stood, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. If I hide from him, it makes me look weak. Makes it easier for him to sell the story that I'm unstable. He's going to try to manipulate you, make you doubt what you heard. I know. She met Damien's eyes. But I also know I'm right, and I'm tired of being afraid. Something shifted in Damien's expression, a flicker of what might have been respect. All right, but I'll be there the entire time. If you want out, just say the word. They descended together, Celine's pulse hammering in her ears. The conference room was windowless, dominated by a long table where her father and Julian sat on one side, bodyguards positioned at the doors. Julian looked perfect. Of course he did. Hair precisely styled, suit impeccable, expression carefully arranged into concern. When Celine entered, he stood immediately. Celine, thank God, I've been so worried. Don't. The word came out sharper than she intended. Don't pretend you care. Julian's face registered hurt so genuine-looking that for a moment Celine almost doubted herself. Almost. I know you're upset, he said gently. The wedding, everything that happened, it's overwhelming. But running here, to him, he gestured at Damien. That's not like you. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. Celine, her father cut in, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Julian explained what happened in the library. You misunderstood a conversation about security arrangements. I didn't misunderstand anything. Julian moved closer, hands raised in a placating gesture that made Celine's skin crawl. You heard me discussing contingency plans with Thomas Garrett, hypothetical scenarios in case Varick's people tried something during the wedding. We were planning security, not what you thought. It was a good lie, plausible, reasonable, easy to believe if you wanted to believe it. Celine looked at her father. You think I'm so stupid I can't tell the difference between security planning and murder conspiracy? Nobody thinks you're stupid, Marcus said, but there was doubt in his eyes. You're under stress. It's natural to... Julian said I'd walk down the aisle like a lamb to slaughter. She kept her voice level, refused to let it shake. He said you'd be too broken to lead after losing me. He called me a mouse, said I barely speak above a whisper and wouldn't see it coming. Those aren't security contingencies. That's premeditated murder. I never said any of that, Julian said, and his voice carried just the right amount of wounded indignation. Celine, I love you. I would never hurt you. You don't love me. You barely know me. This marriage was never about love. It was about power. And I'm the obstacle you needed to remove to get it. Julian turned to Marcus, spreading his hands.
You see what I mean? She's created this entire narrative in her head. Maybe we should postpone the wedding, get her some help. I don't need help. Celine's voice rose despite her efforts to control it. I need someone to believe me. I want to believe you, her father said quietly. But right now, it's your word against Julian's, and he's given us no reason to doubt him. What about Thomas Garrett? Damien spoke for the first time, leaning against the wall with deceptive casualness. Julian's been in regular contact with your head of security. Phone calls, private meetings. Seems odd for a future son-in-law to need that much access to your security chief. Julian didn't miss a beat. Marcus asked me to coordinate with Thomas on integrating my operations with his. It's all part of the merger. Is it? Damien pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then turned the screen toward Marcus. Because these calls happened at odd hours. 2 in the morning, 4 a.m. That's not business coordination. That's something else. Marcus took the phone, his expression darkening as he read. Julian? I have insomnia. Sometimes I work late and need information. Thomas is always available. Julian's mask was starting to slip, just barely, but Celine could see the irritation creeping in. This is exactly what I warned you about, Marcus. Varric is trying to drive a wedge between us, using Celine's confused state to... I'm not confused. Celine stepped forward, forcing herself to move closer to Julian, even though everything in her screamed to run. You're planning to kill me. Frame Damien for it. Use my death to push my father into a war that benefits you. And when my father is too grief-stricken to function, you'll take over everything he's built. Julian's eyes went cold. For just a second, the mask dropped completely, and Celine saw the calculation beneath. Then it was back, the concerned fiancé returning. Marcus, please, she needs help, professional help. This paranoia... Prove it, Marcus interrupted. Everyone turned to look at him. If Celine's wrong, Marcus continued, his voice deadly quiet, then prove it. Let me audit your finances, your communications, your movements over the last 6 months. If you're innocent, you have nothing to hide. The room went very still. Julian's smile never wavered, but something shifted in his posture. Of course. I'm an open book. But Marcus, you have to understand, asking me to prove my innocence based on your daughter's breakdown sets a dangerous precedent. What happens next time someone makes an accusation? Do we audit everyone? We're not talking about everyone. We're talking about you. Marcus stood slowly, and it's not a request. The tension in the room crystallized into something sharp and dangerous. Julian's bodyguard shifted, hands moving toward concealed weapons. Damien's people responded in kind. Gentlemen, Damien said softly, let's not make this bloody. Julian, you can agree to the audit and clear your name, or you can refuse and make everyone in this room wonder what you're hiding. Julian looked at Celine, and for the first time, she saw real hatred in his eyes. Not the casual dismissal of someone beneath notice, but active malice. Fine, he said. Audit whatever you want. You won't find anything. Because he'd covered his tracks, Celine realized. Of course he had. Julian was too smart to leave obvious evidence lying around. Good, Marcus said. Then we'll start today. Thomas Garrett is suspended from duty effective immediately, pending investigation. You'll provide all passwords and account information to my financial team by end of business. And Celine? Julian's voice was silk over steel. Does she stay here, in Varric's custody, while you invade my privacy based on her fantasies? She stays where she feels safe, Marcus said. Until I know for certain what's true, I'm not forcing her to do anything. It wasn't the full belief Celine had hoped for, but it was more than she'd expected. Her father still had doubts, but he was willing to investigate. That was enough. For now. After Marcus and Julian left, Julian's parting look promising retribution, Celine collapsed into a chair, adrenaline draining away and leaving her shaking. You did well, Damien said. I didn't convince him. You planted doubt. That's more than most people manage with Marcus Marlowe. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a decanter on the side table, handed her one. Drink. It'll help. Celine had never developed a taste for alcohol. Her mother considered it unladylike, but she drank anyway. The burn helped ground her. Julian will destroy evidence, she said. Anything your father might find in an audit. He's had months to cover his tracks. Probably, But rushing to destroy evidence creates new evidence. People notice when you start frantically cleaning up. Damien sat across from her. And Thomas Garrett is our real target. He's the weak link. If we can flip him, get him to testify against Julian, he won't flip.
My father pays too well, and Julian probably has leverage on him. Everyone has a breaking point. Celine studied Damien over the rim of her glass. Why are you helping me? Really? I told you, your survival prevents a war I don't want to fight. There's more to it than that. Damien was quiet for a moment, turning his own glass in his hands. Julian Cross represents everything wrong with this business. The new generation of operators who think violence is just numbers on a spreadsheet, who treat people like resources to be expended. He'd kill you without a second thought because you're inconvenient. That kind of thinking is cancer. And you're different? I'd like to think so. I don't kill people because they're inconvenient. I kill people because they're threats. He met her eyes. You're not a threat. You're a victim trying to survive. That makes you worth protecting. It wasn't comfort exactly, but it was honest, and Celine found herself grateful for that honesty. What happens now? She asked. Now we wait for Julian to make a mistake, and we gather what evidence we can. Damien stood, moved to his desk. In the meantime, you should stay visible. Show your father you're stable, rational, not having a breakdown. The more you act like the frightened runaway bride, the easier it is for Julian to discredit you. How do I do that? I've spent my whole life being quiet and obedient. Then maybe it's time to be something else. Damien pulled out a different folder, this one containing photographs. These are Julian's known associates. Study them, learn their faces, their roles. You said you're good at watching, at noticing patterns. Use that. Celine took the folder, spreading the photos across the table. Faces stared back at her. Some she recognized from family gatherings, others completely unknown. If Julian is building a network to take over after your father, these people are part of it, Damien explained. Map the connections, figure out who owes him loyalty and why. It was something to do, something productive instead of just hiding and waiting to die. I'll help, she said. Good. Damien's phone buzzed. He checked it, frowned. Your father wants you to call him, probably wants to make sure you're all right. Celine took the phone he offered, dialed her father's number. He answered on the first ring. Celine. Hi, Dad. Are you okay? Really okay? The concern in his voice caught her off guard. When was the last time her father had asked if she was okay and actually waited for an answer? I'm fine. Tired, but fine. I don't like you staying there, with Varric. I know, but I meant what I said. I don't feel safe coming home while Julian has access. A long pause. If you're wrong about this, you're destroying your engagement and potentially starting a war for nothing. I'm not wrong. I hope you're right. Because if you are, it means I almost gave you to a killer, and I'll have to live with that. His voice roughened. I should have listened to you more. Should have asked what you wanted instead of just assuming you'd go along with everything. Celine's throat tightened. You can still listen. Now. I'm trying. The audit starts tomorrow. We'll see what we find. After she hung up, Damien was watching her with an unreadable expression. What? She asked. You're different when you talk to him. Smaller. He's my father. He's a man who made you feel like your voice doesn't matter. You don't have to shrink for him. The words hit harder than they should have. Celine looked down at the photographs spread before her. All these men who'd learned to take up space in the world while she'd learned to disappear. I don't know how to be anything else, she admitted. You ran from your wedding, came to me for help, stood up to Julian in that conference room. You already know how. Damien leaned back in his chair. You just need practice. Over the next 2 days, Celine learned the structure of Damien's organization from the inside. Not because he was trying to recruit her, but because understanding how his operation worked helped her understand the business she'd grown up adjacent to but never really seen. Elena became her unlikely guide, explaining how the legitimate businesses provided cover for less legitimate ones, how loyalty was earned and maintained, how violence was a last resort rather than a first option. Mr. Varric doesn't lead through fear, Elena explained as they reviewed security footage of the docks. He leads through respect. People work for him because he treats them fairly, pays them well, and doesn't ask them to do things that violate their principles. But he's still a criminal, Celine said. So is your father. So is Julian. The difference is degree and method. Elena fast-forwarded through the footage. Mr. Varick doesn't deal in drugs, doesn't traffic people, doesn't target civilians. He runs protection, smuggling, some financial operations. Gray area stuff, but not, she gestured vaguely, not the kind of evil that keeps you up at night. Celine thought about that while she studied the photographs Damien had given her. She was building a map on one of the empty walls in a conference room, connecting faces with strings, noting relationships and obligations. Thomas Garrett appeared in multiple connections. He knew everyone, had access to everything. If he was feeding information to Julian, he could do massive damage. We need to talk to him, Celine said when Damien came to check her progress. Your father suspended him. He's probably in the wind by now. He has a daughter, college student studying pre-med at State University. He won't run without making sure she's provided for. Damien studied the map she'd created. How do you know that? He mentioned it once at a family dinner, talked about how proud he was, how she was going to be the first Garrett to graduate college. Celine traced the connections with her finger. If we find the daughter, we find him. And then what? Ask him nicely to betray Julian? No, but we can watch him. See who he contacts, where he goes. He'll lead us to evidence eventually. Damien pulled out his phone, sent a quick text. I'll have someone locate the daughter. In the meantime, your father's audit team found something. He showed her the email on his phone. Financial records showing Julian had been siphoning money from Marcus's operations for months. Small amounts, but consistent. Enough to build the war chest Damien had identified. Is this enough? Celine asked. It's embezzlement, but not proof of murder conspiracy. Julian can claim he was borrowing against his future inheritance, that Marcus knew about it. It's not the smoking gun we need. Celine's frustration must have shown because Damien's expression softened fractionally. We're close, he said. Julian's getting nervous. Nervous people make mistakes. As if summoned by the words, Elena appeared in the doorway, her face tight. We have a problem. Someone just tried to breach our security on the east perimeter. We caught them, but… She paused. It's one of Julian's people. Damien's entire demeanor shifted, going cold and focused. Where? Holding room B. He's asking to speak to Miss Marlowe. Celine's stomach dropped. Why would… Only one way to find out. Damien looked at her. You don't have to do this. But she did. If someone from Julian's crew was here asking for her specifically, it meant something had changed. Maybe Julian was making his move. Maybe someone was trying to warn her. Either way, she needed to know. I'll go, she said. The holding room was exactly what it sounded like. Bare walls, a table, 2 chairs. The man sitting in one of them was young, maybe late 20s, with nervous energy that made him tap his fingers against the table in a constant rhythm. Celine recognized him from the photographs. Marcus Chen, low-level operator in Julian's crew. Miss Marlowe, he said when she entered. Thank God. I wasn't sure you'd see me. What do you want, Marcus? To warn you. He looked at Damien, who'd positioned himself against the wall. Julian knows you're here. He knows you're gathering evidence, and he's planning to move against you. When? Damien asked. Tonight. Maybe tomorrow. He's not telling people details, but I heard him talking to Garrett. They're going to stage an attack on this building, make it look like rival gang violence. In the chaos, you'll get caught in the crossfire, just like the original plan, but accelerated. Celine's hands went numb. Why are you telling me this? Because I didn't sign up to kill innocent people. Julian told us this marriage was business, that you were on board with everything. But then I heard what really happened, how you ran because you found out he was going to murder you. That's… Marcus shook his head. That's not okay. I've done a lot of shit I'm not proud of, but I'm not helping someone kill their fiancée. How many people does Julian have with him? Damien's voice was clinical, already running scenarios. Maybe 20 who will actually pull triggers. Another dozen who will provide support. Thomas Garrett's coordinating the whole thing. And your father's organization? Damien looked at Celine. How many of Marcus's people are loyal to Julian? I don't know, she said. I never paid attention to… Shh! Think. You've been watching these people your whole life. Who looks at Julian like a leader? Who defers to him? Celine closed her eyes, pulling up memories of dinner parties, business meetings, casual conversations, faces and names and small gestures that revealed allegiance. Maybe 10, she said slowly. There's a core group that treats him different, like they're already working for him instead of my father. So we're looking at 30 fighters minimum, possibly more. Damien ran the math. I have 20 here, another 15 I can call in within the hour. But if they're staging this as gang violence, they'll hit hard and fast. We need to move first. Or we evacuate, Elena said from the doorway. Get Miss Marlowe somewhere safe and regroup. No. Celine surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. If I run again, Julian wins. He'll spin this as me being unstable, paranoid, causing chaos. My father will believe him because it's easier than accepting the truth. We need to stop Julian here, now, with proof that can't be denied. She's right, Marcus Chen said. If Julian pulls this off, there's no coming back from it. He'll have consolidated power and eliminated everyone who knew the truth. Damien studied Celine for a long moment. You understand what you're asking? This won't be clean. People will die. People will die anyway. At least this way I'll die fighting instead of running. Something shifted in Damien's expression. Recognition, maybe, or respect. All right. Then we fight, but on our terms. He pulled out his phone, started making calls. Elena began coordinating security. And Marcus Chen, the low-level operator who'd risked everything to warn them, sat back in his chair looking relieved. Thank you, Celine told him quietly. Don't thank me yet. We still have to survive the night. Celine thought about the wedding dress she'd left crumpled on a bathroom floor, about the life she'd been expected to live, about the girl who'd spent 23 years being invisible and obedient. That girl was gone. She'd died somewhere between overhearing her own murder being planned and walking into a crime boss's headquarters in bare feet. Whoever Celine was becoming, she'd find out tonight. The plan came together in fragments over the next 4 hours, assembled in Damien's office while armed guards doubled the patrols outside. Celine sat in on every discussion, listening to tactical assessments and contingency scenarios with the same focus she'd once reserved for staying invisible at family dinners. We can't just fortify and wait, one of Damien's lieutenants argued, a broad-shouldered man named Russo. If Julian hits us here, we're sitting ducks. Better to move the fight somewhere we control. He's expecting us to run, Damien countered. That's the whole plan. Force us to evacuate, create chaos, take out Celine in the confusion. If we stay put and fortify, we change his calculations. Or we give him exactly what he wants, a static target. Elena spread a blueprint of the building across the desk. We have advantages. Limited entry points, reinforced positions on every floor, sight lines that favor defense. If Julian wants to storm this building, he'll pay for every inch. And civilian casualties? Russo asked. This neighborhood isn't empty. Which is why we evacuate the surrounding buildings, Damien said. Fire alarm, gas leak, whatever story gets people out without causing panic. We clear a 3-block radius, then we're free to operate. Marcus Chen, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, spoke up. Julian will have someone watching. He'll know you're preparing for something. Good. Let him know. Knowing we're ready and doing something about it are different things. Damien turned to Celine. You should be somewhere else during this. Somewhere secure, away from the fighting. No. Celine, if I hide while other people fight my battle, Julian wins even if he loses. She kept her voice steady despite the fear making her hands shake. He's built his whole plan on the idea that I'm weak, that I don't matter. If I run now, I prove him right.
Being brave doesn't mean being stupid, Elena said, not unkindly. You're not trained for combat. You'd be a liability. Then teach me not to be. Celine looked around the room at these people who'd spent their lives in violence, who understood its rules and rituals in ways she never could. I don't need to be a fighter, but I need to be present. I need my father to see that I didn't break, that Julian didn't scare me into submission. Your father, Damien said slowly, doesn't know this is happening tonight. The realization hit everyone simultaneously. Marcus Marlowe was supposed to be conducting an audit, investigating Julian's finances and connections. He had no idea his future son-in-law was about to launch an armed assault. We need to tell him, Celine said. If we tell him,
He might try to stop it, might give Julian warning. Damien's expression was calculating, or he might not believe us until it's too late to matter. He needs to know. If people die tonight and he finds out afterward that we knew it was coming. Selena shook her head. He'll never forgive that. Never trust anything we say again. Russo looked at Damien. She's right. Marcus needs to know what his future son-in-law is planning, even if he doesn't believe it until the bullets start flying. Damien was quiet for a long moment, weighing options. Finally, he pulled out his phone. I'll call him, but Celine makes the initial contact. He'll take her call. Celine's hands were trembling when she took the phone, but she dialed anyway. Her father answered on the third ring, his voice rough with exhaustion. Celine, it's nearly midnight. What? Dad, I need you to listen. Julian is planning to attack Damien's headquarters tonight. He's going to try to kill me and make it look like gang violence. Silence. Then, how do you know this? Someone from Julian's crew came to warn us. Marcus Chen. He said Julian knows I'm gathering evidence and he's accelerating his plan. Marcus Chen is loyal to Julian. This could be a setup to make me think, Dad, please. Celine closed her eyes, forcing herself to stay calm. I know it sounds paranoid. I know it's easier to believe I'm imagining things. But if I'm right and you do nothing, people will die, including me. She heard her father's breathing on the other end, harsh and conflicted. Put Varric on. Damien took the phone. Marcus, if you're using my daughter to manufacture a crisis, your daughter came to me because she overheard your future son-in-law planning her murder. Everything since then has been her trying to survive while you decide whether to believe her. Damien's voice was level, factual. We have intelligence that Julian is moving tonight. You can dismiss it as paranoia, or you can get your people ready for war. Your choice. What evidence do you have? Beyond the word of one defector? Phone records showing Julian coordinating with Thomas Garrett at unusual hours. Financial records showing systematic embezzlement from your organization. And now Marcus Chen risking his life to warn us about an imminent attack. Damien paused. Damien, how much evidence do you need before you consider the possibility that your daughter is telling the truth? Marcus was quiet for so long Selene thought he'd hung up. Then, where is this attack supposed to happen? My headquarters, where Celine is staying. And you're keeping her there, knowing she's a target? She's choosing to stay against my recommendation. Let me talk to her again. Damien handed the phone back. Celine pressed it to her ear, waiting. Celine, her father said quietly, if this is real, if Julian really is planning what you say, you need to get out of there. Come home. I'll protect you. You can't protect me from someone inside your own organization, not if half your people are loyal to him instead of you. Celine looked at Damien, at Elena, at the maps and blueprints spread across every surface. I'm safer here. With Varric? A man who'd kill me without hesitation if it served his interests? A man who has more reason to keep me alive than Julian does. Celine's voice steadied. Dad, I know this is hard. I know you want to believe Julian is who he's pretended to be, but he's not. And if you don't accept that soon, he's going to destroy everything you've built. Another long silence. Then her father said, I'm sending people. Guards loyal to me, not Julian. They'll be there within the hour. Will Julian know? Probably, which means if he's planning what you say, he'll have to move faster. Marcus's voice hardened. And if this is all a misunderstanding, if you're wrong about this, I'm not wrong. Then I'll see you in the morning. Stay alive until then. He hung up. Celine handed the phone back to Damien, her hands shaking harder now. He's sending guards, which accelerates Julian's timeline, Damien said. He'll know Marcus is responding, which means he'll attack sooner rather than later. We need to be ready in the next hour. The room erupted into motion. Russo left to coordinate defensive positions. Elena started pulling up surveillance feeds on multiple screens. Marcus Chen was escorted to a secure room where he could provide detailed intelligence on Julian's tactics and personnel. And Celine stood in the middle of it all, feeling simultaneously essential and utterly useless. Damien must have seen it on her face because he touched her elbow. Come with me. He led her down a hallway she hadn't explored before to a room that looked like an armory. Weapons lined the walls, guns of every size and caliber, knives, body armor, equipment whose purpose Celine couldn't begin to guess. "If you're staying," Damien said, pulling a vest from a rack, "you wear this. Non-negotiable." The vest was heavy, heavier than Celine expected. Damien helped her into it, adjusting straps with efficient movements. "It'll stop most handgun rounds," he explained. "Maybe rifle fire if you're lucky, but it won't save you from a headshot or close-range shotgun blast, so don't develop any delusions about being invincible." "I won't." He handed her a small pistol. "Have you ever fired a gun?" "Once. My father took me to a range when I was 16. I hated it." "Hate it all you want, but learn to use it." Damien guided her hands into proper position on the grip. "Safety's here. Point and squeeze, don't pull. Aim for center mass because you probably won't hit anything else under stress. And don't fire unless you absolutely have to." The gun felt foreign in her hands, too heavy and too light at the same time. Celine had spent her whole life avoiding violence, pretending it didn't exist just beyond the walls of her carefully curated world. Now she was standing in an armory, wearing body armor, preparing for people to try to kill her. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered. "You can. You already have." Damien's voice was surprisingly gentle. "You survived finding out your fiancé wanted you dead. You ran when running was the only option. You came to me knowing I might kill you myself. You've been doing impossible things for days now. This is just one more. People are going to die tonight. Yes, probably including people who don't deserve it. That's what happens when someone like Julian decides violence is easier than honesty." Damien took her hands, steadied them around the gun. "You didn't start this. You're just trying to survive it." Celine looked at him, really looked at him, for maybe the first time since showing up at his door in a ruined wedding dress. She'd expected a monster, someone as cruel and calculating as Julian, but with more power. Instead, she'd found someone who listened when she spoke, who treated her like she had worth beyond her last name, who'd risked his own safety to help her prove the truth. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked. "And don't say it's just to prevent a war." Damien was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "My sister was 16 when my father married her off to one of his business partners. She didn't want to go, begged him to reconsider. He told her to stop being difficult, that this was what daughters were for." He paused. "She killed herself 3 months later, left a note saying she'd rather die than spend another day as someone's property." Celine's throat tightened. "I'm sorry." "I was 22, too young to stop it, too angry to do anything but watch her funeral and promise myself I'd never let that happen to someone else if I had the power to prevent it." Damien's jaw tightened. "So when you showed up here, terrified and desperate, telling me your fiancé was planning to kill you, I saw her, and I decided not to be powerless this time." Before Celine could respond, Elena's voice crackled over the radio, clipped to Damien's vest. "Movement on the east perimeter, multiple vehicles, unknown affiliation." Damien's entire demeanor shifted, going cold and focused. "Marcus's guards or Julian's people?" "Can't tell yet. They're maintaining distance." "Get everyone to positions. This is happening." He looked at Celine. "You stay in the secure room on the 3rd floor. Reinforced walls, single entry point that we can defend. You'll have 2 guards with you at all times." "What about you?" "I'll be coordinating from the command center. If this goes badly, if Julian's people breach our defenses, Elena has orders to get you out through the underground garage. There's a car ready, keys in the ignition, route map to a safe house outside the city." "I'm not leaving you to— "Yes, you are. Because if you die here, Julian wins. He might lose the battle, but he'll have achieved his objective." Damien's expression softened fractionally. "You matter, Celine, not because of your father's name or your usefulness as a chess piece. You matter because you're a person who deserves to live. Don't forget that when things get ugly." Before she could argue further, he was moving, speaking rapid-fire instructions into his radio. Celine followed him through corridors that were suddenly full of armed people taking positions, checking weapons, preparing for violence with the practiced efficiency of soldiers. The secure room was small, windowless, furnished with a couch and basic supplies. 2 guards took positions outside the door, a woman named Torres who nodded at Celine with professional courtesy, and a younger man whose name she didn't catch. "Stay away from the door," Torres said. "If shooting starts, get behind the couch and stay down. We'll handle it." Then Celine was alone with her thoughts, and the weight of the pistol Damien had given her listening to footsteps and radio chatter filter through the walls, waiting for her father's guards to arrive, waiting for Julian to make his move, waiting to find out if she'd survive the night or become another casualty in a war she'd never asked to be part of. Time stretched. Minutes felt like hours. Celine sat on the couch, then stood, then paced, unable to settle. The vest was uncomfortable, restricting her breathing. The gun was a constant weight in her hands that she couldn't figure out where to put. Radio chatter drifted through the door. Marcus Marlowe's guards had arrived. 6 vehicles, 24 armed men who'd been personally vetted by her father. They were taking positions on the perimeter, coordinating with Damien's people. Then, at 2:47 a.m., according to the clock on the wall, everything went to hell. The first explosion shook the building, a deep boom that rattled Celine's teeth and sent dust raining from the ceiling. Gunfire erupted immediately after, not scattered shots, but sustained volleys that echoed through the corridors. Torres pulled the door shut, locked it. "Stay down!" Celine dropped behind the couch, her heart hammering so hard she thought her ribs might crack. This was real. This was actually happening. Julian was trying to kill her, and the only thing between her and death was a locked door and 2 guards. More explosions. Closer this time. The lights flickered, and for a terrifying moment Celine thought they'd go out completely. But emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Radio chatter became frantic. Damien's voice cutting through the chaos. "East wall is breached. Russo, get your team." Static. "Falling back to secondary positions." Gunfire in the hallway outside. Torres returned fire, the sound deafening even through the door. The younger guard was shouting something Celine couldn't hear over the noise. Then silence. Sudden and complete. Celine's ears rang. She gripped the pistol Damien had given her, trying to remember what he'd said. Safety. Point. Squeeze. Don't pull. The door handle rattled. "Torres," a voice called. "You okay in there?" Torres didn't respond. Celine heard movement, fabric rustling, a harsh whisper she couldn't make out. Then the door exploded inward, blown off its hinges by something that left Celine's ears screaming. She curled tighter behind the couch, pressing her face against the floor. Footsteps. Multiple people entering. "Find her," a familiar voice said. "Julian." Celine's blood turned to ice. She stayed frozen, barely breathing, praying the couch provided enough cover. "Torres is down," someone reported. "Martinez too. No sign of the target." "She's here. She has to be." Julian's voice was calm, almost pleasant. "Celine, I know you're hiding. Come out and we can talk about this like reasonable adults." Celine didn't move, didn't breathe. "Garrett, check behind the furniture." Footsteps approaching her position. Celine's hands tightened on the pistol, her entire body shaking. She could stay hidden and be found helpless, or she could... She stood up, raising the gun with trembling hands. Thomas Garrett froze 3 feet away, his own weapon half raised. For a moment they just stared at each other. Garrett, who'd worked for her father for 15 years, who'd bounced Celine on his knee when she was small, who'd always brought her candy at family gatherings. "Don't," Celine said, her voice barely working. Julian stepped into view, flanked by 2 armed men. He looked exactly as he had at her father's house. Perfectly groomed, completely composed, like orchestrating a massacre was just another item on his schedule. "Celine," he said warmly. "There you are. You've caused quite a bit of trouble, you know." "Stay back." She kept the gun aimed at Garrett, her hands shaking so badly she wasn't sure she could hit him even at this distance. "Or what? You'll shoot Thomas? The man who taught you to ride a bike?" Julian's smile was indulgent. "We both know you're not going to do that. You're not built for violence, sweetheart. It's one of the things I actually liked about you. You don't know anything about me. I know you're soft. I know you've spent your whole life being what other people wanted you to be. I know you're terrified right now and trying very hard not to show it." Julian took a step closer. "Put the gun down, Celine. This doesn't have to end badly for you." "You're planning to kill me." "Was planning. Past tense." Julian gestured around the room. "This whole situation has gotten out of control. Your father's involved now, Varric knows too much, and honestly, the wedding plan was always a bit theatrical. I've adapted." "To what?" "To you being useful instead of dead." Julian's expression shifted, calculation replacing charm. You're smart, Celine, smarter than your father gives you credit for. You figured out my plan, came to Varric, built a case against me. That takes intelligence and nerve, qualities I can work with. Celine didn't lower the gun. What are you talking about? I'm talking about partnership. You help me take over your father's organization, and I make it worth your while. Money, power, freedom to do whatever you want. All you have to do is tell Marcus that tonight was a tragic misunderstanding, that Varric staged an attack to frame me, that you were caught in the crossfire, but I rescued you. You're insane. I'm practical. Your father's finished whether you help me or not. The audit found enough evidence to make him paranoid about everyone around him. His organization is fracturing. I'm going to end up in control regardless. The only question is whether you're with me or against me. Celine's mind raced. Julian was offering her survival, but at the cost of betraying her father and Damien, at the cost of becoming complicit in everything Julian planned to do. And if I refuse, she asked, then I kill you here and now, tell your father Varric did it, and proceed with the original plan. Tragedy, grief, war. It's messier than I'd like, but it works. Julian shrugged. Your choice. The gun was so heavy in Celine's hands. She wanted to put it down, wanted to stop shaking, wanted to be anywhere but here, making impossible decisions. Then she thought about Damien's sister, about all the women who'd been traded and sold and married off like property, about spending the rest of her life being what Julian wanted her to be, useful, obedient, silent. No, she said. Julian's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. No? I'm not helping you. I'm not lying for you. I'm not going to spend my life being your puppet. Celine's voice steadied. You were right about one thing. I am soft. I've spent my whole life avoiding conflict, but I'd rather die fighting you than live serving you. Brave words from someone who's never pulled a trigger. Julian nodded to Garrett. Take the gun from her. Garrett moved forward. Celine squeezed the trigger. The recoil surprised her, jerked her arms up. The bullet went wide, punching into the wall 2 feet from Garrett's head. But she'd fired. She'd actually fired. Garrett froze. Julian's men raised their weapons, and the door behind them exploded inward for the second time that night. Damien came through first, firing as he moved. One of Julian's guards went down immediately. The second spun to engage, and Elena put 3 rounds in his chest from the doorway. Garrett dove for cover. Julian dropped behind an overturned chair. And Celine stood in the middle of it all, still holding the gun, her ears ringing from the sustained gunfire in an enclosed space. Damien grabbed her arm, pulled her toward the door. Move! They ran. Down corridors filled with smoke and emergency lighting, over debris and spent shell casings, past bodies Celine tried not to look at. Elena and 2 other guards provided cover, laying down suppressing fire whenever Julian's people appeared. They reached a stairwell. Damien pushed Celine through first, then followed, taking the stairs 3 at a time. Her legs burned, her breath came in ragged gasps, and the vest seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. Garage, Damien said between breaths. Get to the car, drive south, don't stop until you hit the safe house. What about you? I'm staying. This is my building, my people. I'm not running. They burst into the underground garage. The car Damien had mentioned was waiting, a nondescript sedan with keys in the ignition. Go, he said, pushing her toward it. Damien! Gunfire erupted from the stairwell. Damien returned fire, giving Celine cover to reach the car. She yanked the door open, threw herself inside. The engine roared to life. Behind her, Damien was still fighting, still holding the position long enough for her to escape. Celine put the car in gear, her hands slick with sweat on the steering wheel. Then headlights filled her rear-view mirror, multiple vehicles pouring into the garage from the street entrance, blocking her exit. She was trapped. Celine's foot hovered over the gas pedal, her brain screaming at her to reverse, to ram through whatever was blocking her escape. But the vehicles weren't Julian's. She could see that much through the headlights' glare. They were black SUVs, identical to the ones her father used. The lead vehicle's door opened. Marcus Marlowe stepped out. Celine's hands went numb on the steering wheel. Behind her, Damien was still firing into the stairwell, holding off Julian's people. She was caught between her father and the man who'd tried to help her, with nowhere left to run. Marcus approached the car, flanked by armed guards. Celine killed the engine with shaking hands and climbed out.
the pistol still gripped uselessly in her right hand. "Dad, inside, now." His voice was steel wrapped in ice. "Bring her." Two guards moved to flank Celine, not roughly, but firmly enough that she understood refusal wasn't an option. They walked her past her father, past the line of SUVs, toward a vehicle in the center of the convoy. Behind her, Damien shouted something she couldn't make out over the gunfire. She looked back in time to see him spot her with Marcus's people, see his expression shift from relief to something harder. Then she was being pushed into the back of an SUV and the door slammed shut. Her father climbed in beside her. The guards took positions in the front seats. The engine started. "Where are we going?" Celine asked. Marcus didn't answer. He was staring straight ahead, jaw tight, hands clenched into fists on his knees. Celine had seen her father angry before. The cold, controlled fury he showed when business deals fell through or rivals stepped out of line. But this was different. This was rage barely held in check. They drove in silence through streets empty at this hour, leaving Damien's headquarters and the battle still raging inside. Celine wanted to ask about Damien, about Elena, about whether her father's people were helping defend against Julian or just extracting her from the situation. But the questions died in her throat. Finally, Marcus spoke. "How long have you been working with Varric?" The question was so unexpected that Celine actually laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Working with him? I showed up at his door 3 days ago in a wedding dress, terrified for my life. That's not a partnership, that's desperation. You've been gathering evidence against Julian, building a case, coordinating with Varric's people. Because Julian is trying to kill me. Because you wouldn't listen when I told you the truth." Her voice rose despite her efforts to control it. "What was I supposed to do? Come home and hope he didn't follow through? You were supposed to trust me to protect you. How could I? You'd already decided I was unstable. You wanted to believe Julian's version, where I was just a nervous bride who misunderstood a conversation." Celine turned to face him fully. "You sent me to marry him, Dad. You handed me over to a man who was planning my murder. How was I supposed to trust your judgment about anything?" Marcus flinched. It was subtle, a slight tightening around his eyes, but Celine saw it. "The audit found evidence," he said quietly. "Financial irregularities. Communications with people who should have been loyal to me, not to Julian. Patterns that suggested he was building something separate from my organization." "I know. Damien showed me." "Damien," her father's tone went cold again. "You're on a first-name basis with a man who's killed more of my people than I can count. He's also the man who kept me alive when my own fiancée wanted me dead. He believed me when you didn't. He gave me a place to hide when nowhere else was safe." Celine met her father's eyes. "I'm grateful to him, and I don't care if that makes you angry." The SUV pulled into a parking garage Celine didn't recognize. They descended 3 levels underground before stopping in a section that looked unused, just concrete pillars and empty spaces. Marcus gestured for her to follow him out of the vehicle. They walked to a corner of the garage where a metal door stood between 2 pillars. One of the guards unlocked it, revealing a stairwell that descended further. "Where are we?" Celine asked. "Secure location. Somewhere Julian doesn't know about." Marcus started down the stairs. "Somewhere we can talk without being interrupted or recorded." The stairwell ended in a basement room that looked like it had been converted into an emergency operations center. Monitors lined one wall, showing feeds from various locations. A table dominated the center, covered with papers and maps. And sitting at that table, looking bruised and defeated, was Thomas Garrett. Celine stopped in the doorway. Garrett looked up, his expression a mix of shame and resignation. "Miss Marlowe," he said quietly. "I'm sorry." Marcus gestured to a chair. "Sit, both of you. It's time we had an honest conversation." Celine sat slowly, keeping the table between herself and Garrett. Her father remained standing, arms crossed, looking between them like a judge preparing to deliver a verdict. "Thomas has been very forthcoming," Marcus said, "about Julian's plans, about the conspiracy to frame Varric, about the intention to kill my daughter and use her death to consolidate power." He paused. "Would you like to tell Celine yourself, Thomas? What you told me?" Garrett's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against the table. "Julian approached me 8 months ago, said he had plans to modernize the organization, make it more efficient,
Asked if I'd be interested in a larger role when that happened. And you said yes, Celine said flatly. I said I'd listen. At first it was just ideas, ways to cut costs, eliminate redundancies, business strategy. But over time it became clear he wasn't talking about working with your father. He was talking about replacing him. By killing me. Garrett closed his eyes. That came later, after the engagement was announced. Julian said it was the perfect opportunity. A wedding would bring all the key players together, create the right conditions for a dramatic incident that could be blamed on rivals. He couldn't finish. Expendable, Selene supplied. Collateral damage. I told him it was too far, that there had to be another way. But he said this was the cleanest option. Quick, decisive, would achieve multiple objectives at once. Garrett finally looked at her. I should have gone to your father immediately. Should have refused. But Julian had leverage, evidence of things I'd done, mistakes I'd made. He said if I didn't cooperate, I'd go down anyway. Marcus's expression was carved from stone. So instead you helped plan my daughter's murder. I fed him information, coordinated timing, helped him identify which of your people might be sympathetic to his vision. Garrett's voice cracked. I convinced myself I was protecting my family, that if I went to prison, my daughter would lose everything. But there's no justification. I helped a man plan to kill a woman I've known since she was born. There's nothing I can say that makes that acceptable. Celine wanted to feel rage, wanted to scream at this man who'd betrayed her family, who'd helped Julian orchestrate her death, but all she felt was tired. Why are you telling us this now? She asked. Because Marcus caught me trying to leave the city, had his people waiting at the airport. Garrett looked at Marcus. And because when he asked if I wanted to make this right, or die knowing my daughter would grow up with a traitor father, I realized I had one chance to do something decent. Marcus pulled a recorder from his pocket, set it on the table. Tell her what you told me about tonight, about the attack on Varick's headquarters. Garrett took a shaky breath. Julian moved up the timeline when he learned you'd sent guards to protect Celine. He knew he was running out of time before your audit uncovered enough evidence to turn you against him completely. So he assembled everyone loyal to him, about 30 fighters, and planned a direct assault. The objective was to kill Celine and Varick, make it look like a gang war, and in the chaos, eliminate anyone else who might have evidence against him. Marcus Chen, Celine said. The man who warned us. Is he? Dead. Julian's people killed him during the initial breach. Made it look like he died defending Julian's position. Garrett's voice was hollow. That's how Julian operates. He eliminates loose ends. And you would have been next, Marcus said. After Celine was dead and I'd committed my forces to war with Varick, Julian would have found a way to dispose of you. Can't have anyone who knows the truth still breathing. Garrett nodded slowly. I know. Marcus turned to Celine. Thomas has agreed to testify, to provide evidence of Julian's conspiracy, his embezzlement, his plans for the organization. With his testimony and the audit findings, I have enough to move against Julian legally and professionally. Legally? Celine's laugh was bitter. Dad, Julian just attacked Damien's headquarters with armed men. He tried to kill me. This isn't about legality anymore. It's about not starting a war I can't control. Marcus sat down heavily. If I just kill Julian, his people will scatter or retaliate. Some of them genuinely believe in his vision for the organization. They'll see me as the obstacle. But if I expose him, prove he's been stealing and planning to betray everyone who trusted him, they'll turn on him themselves. It made sense from a strategic perspective. Celine could see the logic, but it felt inadequate, like trying to solve murder with paperwork. What about Damien? She asked. Julian's people are still attacking his headquarters. People are dying right now. My guards are there. They're helping Varick's people defend the building and contain Julian's forces. Marcus looked at her steadily. I can't prove Varick's innocence to the world, but I can make sure he's not framed for your death. That was the deal we made when I arrived. He helps me take down Julian. I make sure his name stays clear. You made a deal with Damien? We both want Julian stopped. That makes us temporary allies. Marcus's expression was unreadable. Don't mistake that for friendship. When this is over, Varick and I will go back to being enemies. But for now, we have a common interest. Celine thought about Damien fighting in the stairwell, buying her time to escape.
About Elena and the others who'd defended her when she had nowhere else to go. About the kindness Damien had shown despite having every reason to use her as a pawn in his own games. "I'm going back," she said. "No, you're not. Julian is there. If you want to stop him, that's where you need to be. And I'm not hiding in a basement while other people fight my battles." Celine stood, surprised by how steady her legs felt. "You can come with me or you can stay here. But I'm going back." Marcus and his daughter stared at each other across the table. Celine waited for him to order her to stay, to physically restrain her if necessary. Instead, something shifted in his expression. "You're more like your mother than I realized," he said quietly. She had the same stubborn streak, same refusal to back down once she'd decided something was right. "Mom never told me to be stubborn. She told me to be quiet and obedient. Because I asked her to, because I thought protecting you meant keeping you soft." Marcus stood slowly. "I was wrong, and it almost got you killed." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with years of unspoken expectations and missed opportunities to know each other as more than father and chess piece. "We're going back," Marcus said finally. "But you stay behind my guards at all times. You don't engage unless you absolutely have to. Understood?" "Understood." They returned to the SUVs, Thomas Garrett flanked by guards who weren't gentle anymore. Celine climbed into the lead vehicle with her father, and the convoy pulled out of the garage. The drive back to Damien's headquarters took 15 minutes that felt like hours. Celine watched the city pass, normal people sleeping in their beds, unaware that a few miles away, people were killing each other over power and betrayal. As they approached the building, the sounds of gunfire had diminished. Either the fighting was over, or it had moved deeper inside where the sounds didn't carry. Marcus's people had established a perimeter. Celine saw Damien's guards mixed with her father's, an uneasy alliance working together to contain the situation. Bodies lay covered with tarps on the street, too many bodies. Marcus Chen was among them, she realized with a sick feeling. The man who'd risked everything to warn them, who'd chosen conscience over survival. Elena met them at the entrance, her face streaked with soot and blood that might not have been hers. "Mr. Marlowe, we've pushed Julian's forces back to the 4th floor. They're contained but heavily armed. Varric is coordinating the assault." "Casualties?" Marcus asked. 11 dead on our side, 17 wounded. Julian's people lost at least 20, maybe more." Elena's expression was grim. "This is bad. Police are going to respond soon. We need to finish this fast." "Where's Julian?" Celine asked. 4th floor with the rest of his people. "He's demanding safe passage out of the city in exchange for standing down." "Don't give it to him," Celine said immediately. "The moment you let him walk, he'll regroup and come back harder." Marcus looked at her. "What would you do?" The question surprised her. Her father had never asked her opinion on strategy before, had never treated her as someone whose judgment mattered. "I'd offer him a choice," Celine said slowly. "Surrender now and face trial, or we come in and finish this. No negotiation, no safe passage. He started this war. He doesn't get to walk away from it." Elena's expression was approving. Marcus considered for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, let's go tell him." They entered the building together, moving through corridors that smelled of smoke and cordite. The damage was extensive, bullet holes in walls, blown out doors, fire suppression systems still dripping water onto ruined carpets. This was what Julian had brought to Damien's headquarters, what he'd been willing to unleash just to eliminate one frightened woman who knew too much. Damien was on the 3rd floor, coordinating from a position behind makeshift barricades. When he saw Celine with Marcus, his expression flickered through relief, confusion, and calculation. "Marcus," he said evenly, "didn't expect you to join the party." "My daughter convinced me we have a common interest." Marcus surveyed the defensive positions. "What's the situation?" "Julian's boxed in. He's got maybe 15 fighters left, plenty of ammunition, and nowhere to go. He's trying to negotiate, but I'm not interested in letting him walk." "Neither am I." Marcus looked at Damien steadily. "We finish this together, then we go back to hating each other." "Works for me." Celine watched the two men, rivals who'd spent years trying to destroy each other, coordinate strategy with professional efficiency. They'd probably go back to war eventually, but for now, they had a shared enemy. "I'm going with you,"
Celine said when they finished planning the assault. Both men turned to stare at her. Absolutely not, Damien said. Not happening, Marcus agreed. Julian needs to see me, needs to know I didn't run, that I'm not afraid anymore. Celine's voice was steady. He built his whole plan on the assumption that I'd break, that I'd hide or collapse or do whatever he expected. I want him to see he was wrong. Celine, this isn't about proving a point, Damien started. It's about ending this. She looked between them. You said yourself he's trying to negotiate. He still thinks he has leverage, that he can talk his way out. But if he sees me standing with both of you, alive and ready to testify against him, he'll know it's over. That's when men like Julian make mistakes. Marcus studied his daughter with an expression she couldn't read. You understand you could die? Even with guards, even with us controlling the situation, bullets don't care about your courage. I know, but I'm tired of hiding, tired of being the frightened girl everyone expects. Celine met her father's eyes. You asked what Mom would do. She'd walk in there and make Julian face what he did, so that's what I'm doing. Damien looked at Marcus. Some unspoken communication passed between them, two men who understood violence, who knew the risks, who recognized that sometimes the only way forward was through the fire. She stays behind both of us, Marcus said finally. Any shooting starts, she hits the ground immediately. Agreed, Damien said. They assembled a team, 12 fighters split evenly between Marcus's people and Damien's. Celine stayed in the center of the formation, flanked by guards on all sides. They moved up the stairwell to the 4th floor, where Julian's remaining forces had barricaded themselves in what used to be a conference area. Julian Cross, Marcus called out when they reached the defensive position. It's over. Your people are dead or surrendered. You're surrounded. Come out and we'll end this without more bloodshed. Silence. Then Julian's voice, still carrying that same smooth confidence. I'd rather discuss terms, Marcus. I have information you'll want, evidence about your competitors, leverage you can use. Let me walk, and it's yours. I have all the evidence I need. Thomas Garrett is cooperating fully. A longer silence. Celine could almost hear Julian's mind working, recalculating. Then let's talk about mutual benefit, Julian tried again. I walk away. You keep your daughter and your organization. Everyone wins. Everyone except the people you killed tonight. Marcus Chen, Torres, Martinez. All the others who died because you couldn't accept that murder isn't a business strategy. Marcus's voice hardened. You're finished, Julian. The only question is whether you surrender or we come in shooting. You won't risk it. Too much collateral damage. I've got hostages up here, some of Varick's people we captured during the breach. Damien's jaw tightened. He looked at Elena, who nodded confirmation. 3 of their people were unaccounted for. Doesn't change anything, Damien said. You hurt them. You die harder. That's your only guarantee. Celine stepped forward, moving past the guards before anyone could stop her. She walked to where she could be seen through the gaps in Julian's barricade, standing in the open with her father and Damien on either side. Julian, she called out. It's me, the mouse, the lamb you thought would walk to slaughter. She heard movement behind the barricade. Then Julian stepped into view, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked disheveled. His perfect hair was mussed, his suit torn, blood on his collar from a wound she couldn't see. But his eyes were still cold, still calculating. Celine, he said, still hiding behind stronger men, I see. I'm not hiding. I'm standing right here where you can see me. Still alive, still ready to testify about every word I heard you say. She took another step forward, ignoring the hissed warnings from the guards behind her. You were right about one thing. I am soft. I don't like violence. I spent my whole life avoiding it. But you taught me something important these last few days. What's that? That sometimes the only way to stop a monster is to stop running from it. Celine's voice didn't shake. You're done, Julian. Your plan failed. Your people are dead or captured. Thomas Garrett is cooperating with my father. You have nothing left to negotiate with except hostages, and killing them just makes your situation worse. Julian's expression shifted, mask finally cracking. You think you've won? You think standing there with Daddy and Varick makes you strong? He laughed, and there was genuine malice in it. You're still the same frightened girl who ran from her wedding. Still weak, still alive, Celine interrupted. which is more than you'll be if you don't surrender in the next 60 seconds. The deadline hung in the air. Celine watched Julian's face cycle through emotions: rage, calculation, desperate searching for any angle he'd missed. But there was nothing left. No leverage, no escape, no way to talk his way out of the corner he'd backed himself into. Finally, he lowered his weapon. "I want immunity," he said. "Full cooperation in exchange for witness protection, and—" "No," Marcus's voice cut through. "You get a cell and a trial. That's all." Julian's people began emerging from behind the barricade, hands raised, weapons dropped. They looked exhausted, defeated, some of them barely more than kids who'd believed Julian's promises of power and progress. The hostages came out next. Damien's 3 people, bruised but alive. Elena moved to get them medical attention. And finally, Julian himself stepped fully into view. 2 of Marcus's guards moved to restrain him, pulling his arms behind his back with efficient brutality. "This isn't over," Julian said as they cuffed him. He was looking at Celine, and the hatred in his eyes was pure. "You think you've beaten me? You've just started a war. My people will—" "Your people just watched you lose to a woman you called a mouse," Celine said quietly. "They're not following you anywhere." Marcus's guards led Julian away. Celine watched him go, this man who'd planned her death so casually, who'd seen her as nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. Part of her wanted to feel victorious. Mostly, she just felt tired. Damien appeared at her shoulder. "You okay?" "I don't know yet," she admitted. "Ask me tomorrow." "Fair enough." He looked at Marcus. "We need to clean this up before the police arrive. I've got people who can make it look like it was Julian's crew fighting among themselves. Keep both our names out of it." "Appreciated." Marcus extended his hand. Damien took it, and they shook once. Brief, businesslike, already returning to the roles of enemies temporarily allied. Then Marcus turned to Celine. "Let's go home." Home. The word felt strange. The house she'd grown up in suddenly seemed like it belonged to a different person, someone who didn't exist anymore. But she nodded and followed her father out of the building, past the bodies and the damage, and the evidence of a war she'd somehow survived. In the SUV, Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then, "I underestimated you. I won't make that mistake again." It wasn't an apology, but for Marcus Marlowe, it might have been as close as he could get. "What happens now?" Celine asked. "Now we rebuild. Figure out who in my organization was loyal to Julian, clean house, establish new security protocols." He paused. "And you decide what you want to do. You've earned the right to choose your own path." The offer hung between them, freedom, after a lifetime of being told where to go and who to be. Celine looked out at the city passing by, dawn starting to break over buildings that had no idea what had happened in the darkness. Somewhere out there was a life she could build herself, brick by brick, without anyone else's expectations weighing her down. She had no idea what that life looked like yet, but for the first time in 23 years, she had the chance to find out. The Marlowe estate looked exactly as it had the morning of Celine's wedding: manicured gardens, imposing architecture, every detail calculated to project wealth and power. But Celine felt different walking through the front door. The house hadn't changed. She had. Her mother was waiting in the foyer, still dressed despite the early hour. She took one look at Celine, dirty clothes, exhaustion written across her face, the weight of violence still clinging to her, and her carefully composed expression crumbled. "Oh, sweetheart." She pulled Celine into an embrace that smelled of expensive perfume and desperation. "I was so worried. Your father wouldn't tell me anything, just that you were safe and he'd bring you home." Celine let herself be held for a moment, then gently pulled back. "I'm fine, Mom." "You're not fine. Look at you." Her mother's hands fluttered toward Celine's face, her hair, wanting to fix what couldn't be fixed with grooming. "What happened? Where have you been?" "Margaret." Marcus's voice was quiet but firm. "Let her breathe." Celine's mother stepped back, hands clasped together to stop their shaking. "I don't understand any of this. The wedding was supposed to— Julian said you were having a breakdown, that you'd run to Varric because you were confused and frightened. But then your father left in the middle of the night with armed men, and I heard explosions, and—" Her voice broke. "Someone needs to tell me what's happening." Marcus and Celine exchanged a look. How much did they tell her? How much could she handle?
Julian was planning to kill me, Celine said simply. I overheard him discussing it with Thomas Garrett. He was going to make it look like Damien Varick's people did it. Use my death to push Dad into a war. I ran because staying meant dying. Her mother went very pale. That can't be. Julian is in custody, Marcus said. Thomas Garrett is cooperating with federal investigators. We have evidence of embezzlement, conspiracy, and tonight's attack on Varick's headquarters where 11 people died. It's over, Margaret. Julian is finished. Celine's mother sank into a chair, her perfect posture finally collapsing. I pushed for that engagement. I thought he was perfect, well-educated, good family, ambitious. I thought you'd be safe with him. You thought I'd be taken care of, Celine corrected gently. That's not the same thing as safe. I wanted what I had. A stable marriage, financial security, a place in society. Her mother looked up and there were tears in her eyes now. I didn't know you were unhappy. You never said anything. Because I was taught not to. Because good daughters don't complain or ask for different lives or question the arrangements made for them. Celine sat down across from her mother. But I'm done being that daughter. I can't be her anymore. Her mother reached across the space between them, took Celine's hand. I'm sorry. For pushing you toward Julian, for not asking what you wanted, for teaching you that your voice didn't matter. She squeezed Celine's fingers. Your grandmother did the same to me. I told myself I was protecting you by preparing you for the life you'd have, but I was just passing down the same cage. It was the most honest conversation Celine had ever had with her mother, and it hurt because it came too late to change what had already happened, but also because it meant maybe something different could start now. I need to sleep, Celine said finally, and then I need to figure out what comes next. Her mother nodded, wiping at her eyes. Your room is exactly as you left it. Though I had them remove the wedding dress, I couldn't look at it. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by images of Julian's cold eyes and gunfire and Marcus Chen's covered body on the street. When she finally woke, it was past noon, and someone had left a tray of food outside her door that she couldn't bring herself to eat. She found her father in his study, surrounded by papers and talking on the phone in clipped tones. He gestured for her to sit, finished the call, then poured 2 glasses of whiskey even though it was barely afternoon. Federal prosecutors want to talk to you, he said, handing her a glass. About what you overheard, about Julian's plan. They're building a case. When? Tomorrow, if you're ready. Next week if you're not. They're being patient because you're the primary witness. Marcus sat heavily in his chair. Thomas Garrett's testimony is valuable, but you're the one who heard Julian discuss the murder plot directly. Without you, their case is weaker. Celine sipped the whiskey, letting it burn. I'll talk to them tomorrow. The sooner this is done, the sooner I can move on. About that, Marcus pulled a folder from his desk. I've been thinking about your future, about what you said in the car, about choosing your own path. He slid the folder across to her. Inside were financial documents, account numbers, investment portfolios, property deeds. This is yours, Marcus said. Money your mother's family left you that I've been managing. It's substantial enough to live on indefinitely if you're smart about it. The properties are in your name, an apartment in the city, a house upstate, both fully paid for. Celine stared at the numbers. She'd never thought about money before, had never needed to because everything was provided. This was freedom in its most practical form. The ability to leave, to build something new, to survive without depending on her father's goodwill. Why are you giving me this now? She asked. Because you've earned the right to choose. And because keeping you dependent on me would make me no better than Julian, just controlling you in a different way. Marcus met her eyes. I can't undo the past. Can't take back the years I spent treating you like a chess piece instead of a person. But I can give you the tools to build whatever future you want. What if what I want has nothing to do with the family business? Then it has nothing to do with the family business. You're not required to be part of my world anymore, Celine. That's the point. She looked at the documents, at the freedom they represented, and felt something crack open in her chest. Not quite forgiveness. Her father's neglect had shaped too many years of her life for that. But maybe understanding. Maybe the beginning of something different. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me yet. The prosecutors are going to be brutal.
Julian's lawyers will try to discredit you, make you look unstable or vindictive. It's going to be ugly. I can handle ugly. I've been handling it for days now. Marcus's expression softened fractionally. You have. Better than I would have expected. Better than I gave you credit for. They sat in silence for a while, drinking whiskey and watching the afternoon light change. Then Celine asked the question that had been nagging at her since the battle ended. What about Damien? What about him? You made a deal with him to help take down Julian together. Does that stand? Marcus's face hardened. Varric is still my enemy, still operates in my territory, still takes business that should be mine. Nothing about that has changed. But he helped me when I had nowhere else to go. He protected me when my own family couldn't. I know, and for that I'm letting certain things slide. The attack on his headquarters will be recorded as internal conflict in Julian's crew. Varric's name stays clean. His operations continue without interference from me. Marcus paused. That's the deal we made. Nothing more. Is it enough? It'll have to be. Varric and I can't be friends, Celine. Our organizations are built on competition and territory. But we can avoid unnecessary bloodshed. That's the best either of us can offer. Celine thought about Damien's quiet strength, the way he'd listened when she spoke, the way he'd risked his own people to keep her safe. She thought about Elena and the guards who'd died defending her, about Marcus Chen, who'd betrayed Julian to save her and paid with his life. I want to thank him, she said, properly, not just a phone call. Marcus studied her for a long moment. You're planning to see him again. I am. That's dangerous for both of you. If people think there's an alliance between my family and Varric, it creates complications. I don't care about complications. I care about showing gratitude to someone who deserves it. Celine held her father's gaze. You said I get to choose my own path now. This is part of that choice. Finally, Marcus nodded. All right, but be careful. Gratitude is one thing. Getting involved in his world is another. I know the difference. She left her father's study with the folder of financial documents, climbed the stairs to her room, and pulled out her phone. Damien's number was still saved from when he'd called her father during the crisis. She hesitated, then typed out a message. This is Celine. Are you free tomorrow afternoon? I'd like to talk. The response came within minutes. I'm free. My office, 2 p.m. I'll be there. The next morning, Celine met with federal prosecutors in a conference room downtown. They were professional, methodical, walking her through every detail of what she'd overheard, every conversation with Julian afterward, every piece of evidence that might support their case. His defense will argue you misheard, the lead prosecutor warned, that wedding day stress made you paranoid, that you interpreted an innocent conversation as a murder conspiracy. They'll bring in psychologists to testify about emotional instability. Let them, Celine said. I know what I heard, and I have Thomas Garrett's testimony backing me up. Julian can spin whatever story he wants. The facts won't change. The prosecutor smiled slightly. You're going to make a good witness, Miss Marlowe. Better than most civilians I've worked with. I've had practice this week, learning to stand my ground. After the meeting, Celine went home, changed into clothes that felt like armor. Simple, but well made. The kind of outfit that projected confidence without trying too hard. Then she drove herself to Damien's headquarters, using the GPS to navigate streets she'd only seen in darkness and fear. The building looked different in daylight. Still imposing, still obviously fortified, but without the immediate threat of violence hanging over it. The guards at the entrance recognized her, waved her through without the suspicion they'd shown when she'd arrived in a wedding dress. Elena met her in the lobby. The older woman looked tired but intact, a bandage visible on her left arm. Miss Marlowe, good to see you walking around on your own terms. You too. Is that? Celine gestured to the bandage. Graze from the firefight. I've had worse. Elena led her toward the elevator. Mr. Varric is expecting you. Fair warning. He's been working nonstop since everything went down. Coordinating cleanup, managing fallout, dealing with your father's people. He's running on coffee and spite at this point. They rode up in silence. When the elevator doors opened, Damien was at his desk, exactly as Elena had described, surrounded by papers, coffee cup at his elbow, looking like he hadn't slept in days. He stood when Celine entered. You look better than the last time you were here. I'm not running for my life anymore.
That helps. Celine sat in the chair across from his desk. How's the recovery going? Slowly. We lost good people. Rebuilding trust, reinforcing security, making sure Julian's remaining loyalists don't try anything stupid. Damien poured coffee, offered her a cup. Your father's kept his word about keeping my name clean. The official story is that Julian's crew had a falling out. It'll hold. Good. Celine accepted the coffee, wrapped her hands around the warm cup. I came to thank you for everything you did, for believing me when my own father wouldn't, for giving me a place to hide, for teaching me I didn't have to be helpless. You were never helpless. You just didn't know it yet. Damien sat back down, studied her across the desk. What are you going to do now? Go back to being Marcus Marlowe's daughter? I don't know how to be anything else. Sure you do. You proved that over the last week. You were sharp, observant, braver than you gave yourself credit for. Those skills don't disappear just because the crisis is over. Celine thought about the folder of financial documents, the freedom her father had given her, the blank slate of a future she could design herself. I've been thinking about that, about what I'm good at, what I noticed while I was here. And I'm good at watching people, at seeing patterns in how they interact, who trusts who, where the power really flows. I did it my whole life at family dinners and business meetings, just watched and listened while everyone assumed I wasn't paying attention. Damien's expression sharpened with interest. That's a valuable skill. I was thinking I could use it, not in my father's world or yours, somewhere neutral, somewhere I could help people navigate situations without getting caught in the crossfire. She paused, trying to articulate the idea that had been forming. Maybe consulting work, helping people understand the dynamics in their organizations, identify potential threats before they become violent. You want to be a professional observer. I want to make sure no other woman ends up where I was, engaged to a killer, surrounded by people who wouldn't listen, with nowhere safe to run. Celine met his eyes. You said you helped me because of your sister. Because you couldn't save her, but you could save me. I want to do the same thing. Help people who are trapped in situations they can't see their way out of. Damien was quiet for a long moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. It's dangerous work. The kind of people who need that help are usually in dangerous situations. You'd be walking into crisis after crisis. I know, but I'd be doing it on my own terms, using skills I actually have, helping people who need it. That's more than I had a week ago. You'd need training, security, self-defense, conflict resolution. Can't just walk into volatile situations with nothing but good intentions. I know that too. I'm not naive about what it would take. Celine set down her coffee cup. But I'm willing to learn, willing to work for it. Damien studied her for a long moment, and Celine could see him calculating, weighing options, considering possibilities. Finally, he said, I might know someone who could help. Former FBI, works with domestic violence victims now, helps them escape abusive situations safely. She's good at what she does, trains people how to de-escalate, how to recognize danger signs. If you're serious about this, I could make an introduction. I'm serious. Then I'll set it up. Damien pulled out his phone, made a note. Fair warning, she's going to push you hard, test whether you really mean this or if it's just post-crisis adrenaline talking. Let her test me, I'll prove I mean it. Something shifted in Damien's expression. Approval? Maybe. Or respect. You've changed, Celine Marlowe. The woman who showed up here in a wedding dress wouldn't have said that. That woman died somewhere between overhearing her own murder being planned and standing in front of Julian while he surrendered. I don't know who I'm becoming yet, but she's different. Different is good. Different is survival. They talked for another hour about training possibilities and safe houses for people fleeing danger, about the networks that existed to help women escape abusive situations. Damien knew more about this world than Celine had expected. Not because he participated in abuse, but because he'd spent years building alternatives for people trying to get out. My sister didn't have options, he explained. She thought her choices were stay with a man who hurt her or disgrace her family by leaving. Nobody told her there were other paths. Nobody gave her resources or support, or even just listened when she tried to talk about what was happening. His voice was tight with old pain. I've spent 15 years making sure other people have the options she didn't. It's not enough. It'll never be enough. But it's something. Celine understood then why Damien had helped her so completely, so immediately.
She'd walked into his headquarters and represented every person he'd failed to save, every woman trapped by powerful men and rigid expectations. Helping her had been about more than preventing a war or gaining leverage. It had been about finally doing what he couldn't do when it mattered most. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for seeing me as a person instead of a pawn. You made that easy. You showed up and told the truth, even when it was terrifying. That takes courage most people don't have." Damien stood, walked around the desk. "You're going to be good at this work, Celine, better than you know. Just don't lose yourself in other people's crises. Remember, you have a life worth living too." "I'll try." "Good enough." Elena appeared in the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation at the East Docks that needs your attention." Damien nodded, already shifting back into the role of crime boss coordinating operations. Celine stood to leave, but he stopped her with a hand on her arm. "One more thing. Your father and I have an understanding now. We stay out of each other's way, avoid unnecessary bloodshed. But that doesn't mean we're friends. If you keep coming here, people will notice. They'll make assumptions about alliances that don't exist." "I know, but I'm not going to stop seeing you just because it's politically complicated. You're—" Celine paused, searching for the right word. "You're someone I trust. That's rare enough to be worth protecting." Damien's expression softened fractionally. "Same. Which is why I'm telling you to be careful. Trust is valuable, but it's also dangerous in our world. Don't let it make you careless." "I won't." She left his office, rode the elevator down, walked out into afternoon sunlight that felt too normal for everything that had happened. The city continued around her, people shopping, working, living their lives without knowing that a few blocks away, a war had been fought and ended in the darkness. Celine drove home slowly, processing everything. She had money now, independence, the freedom to build whatever future she wanted. She had connections to people who could help her learn skills she'd need. She had a purpose that felt real, that used what she was good at instead of trying to force her into a mold that didn't fit. For the first time in her life, she had possibilities instead of obligations. Over the next month, Celine built the scaffolding of her new existence. She met with Damien's contact, a fierce woman named Rachel, who'd survived her own domestic violence situation and now spent her days helping others do the same. Rachel was exactly as tough as Damien had warned, pushing Celine through scenario after scenario, testing her reactions and decision-making under pressure. "You've got good instincts," Rachel said after their third session. "But instincts aren't enough when someone's holding a gun. You need training, real training." So Celine trained. Self-defense classes that left her bruised and exhausted, conflict de-escalation workshops that taught her how to read body language and diffuse tension before it became violence, legal seminars that explained the systems people could use to escape dangerous situations. She also testified at Julian's trial. The defense attorneys were brutal, exactly as the prosecutors had warned. They painted her as unstable, vindictive, a jilted bride creating conspiracy theories to justify running from her own wedding. But Celine held firm, recounting exactly what she'd heard in calm, clear language that couldn't be shaken by aggressive questioning. When Thomas Garrett took the stand and corroborated every detail, Julian's defense collapsed. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before finding him guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, embezzlement, assault with deadly weapons, and a dozen other charges that added up to life in prison without possibility of parole. Celine attended the sentencing. She wanted to see Julian's face when he realized he'd lost everything: his freedom, his plans, his future. She wanted him to see her sitting in the courtroom, alive and whole, and ready to build a life he'd never be part of. When the judge delivered the sentence, Julian turned to look at her. For a moment, she saw the man who'd called her a mouse, who'd planned her death with casual indifference. Then guards led him away, and Celine felt something release in her chest. It was over. Really, truly over. Her mother hugged her in the courthouse hallway, crying with relief. Her father stood nearby, not quite smiling, but something close to it. "You did well," Marcus said. "Garrett's testimony was important, but you were the one who made the jury believe it. You stayed strong when they tried to break you down." "I learned from watching you," Celine said. "How to project confidence even when you're uncertain. How to control a room. All those business dinners I sat through,
Turns out I was learning something useful after all. Marcus actually smiled then, brief but genuine. Your mother and I have been talking about making changes, about how we raised you, what we taught you to value. He paused. We want to do better, be better, if you'll give us the chance. It wasn't a full apology, but it was acknowledgement, which was more than Celine had expected. I'd like that, she said. But on new terms. I'm not coming back to live at the estate. I'm not rejoining the family business. I'm building something separate. We know, and we support it. Her mother stepped forward, took Celine's hand. I talked to Rachel, the woman you've been training with. She told me about the work you're planning to do. I want to help. Funding, connections, whatever you need. Mom, I can't undo the past. Can't take back the years I spent teaching you to be small and quiet and obedient. But I can help you build something that helps other women avoid the trap I fell into. Her mother's eyes were clear, determined. Let me do this, please. Celine looked at her parents, these people who'd shaped her, limited her, almost gotten her killed through their assumptions and expectations. They were trying. It was imperfect and late, and couldn't fix everything, but it was something. All right, she said, but I'm in charge. I make the decisions. You provide support, not control. Agreed, her mother said immediately. Agreed, her father echoed. 6 months after the night she'd run from her wedding, Celine opened the doors to her consulting practice. It was small at first, just her, an office in a building Damien had helped her find, business cards that read Marlowe Risk Assessment, helping you see what others miss. Her first client was a young woman who'd been offered a job at a company where the CEO had a reputation for inappropriate behavior with female employees. Celine helped her research the company culture, identify warning signs, and negotiate a contract that protected her legally if things went wrong. Her second client was a man whose business partner was making decisions that felt off. Celine spent 2 weeks observing their meetings, analyzing their interactions, and uncovered evidence that the partner was siphoning money for a competing venture. Word spread slowly but steadily. People in difficult situations, people who needed someone with sharp eyes and no stake in the outcome, people who were scared but not sure if their fear was justified. They found their way to Celine's office. She worked cases that ranged from corporate espionage to domestic abuse, from family business disputes to romantic relationships that had turned controlling. She helped people see patterns they'd been missing, connections that weren't obvious, danger signs they'd been ignoring. And every time she helped someone escape a situation that could have destroyed them, she thought about the girl who'd stood outside a library door in a wedding dress, hearing her own death being planned. That girl was gone. But what she'd become was better, stronger, sharper, purposeful in ways she'd never imagined possible. Damien became an unlikely friend. They met for coffee occasionally, compared notes on cases where their worlds overlapped, maintained a careful relationship that acknowledged their different worlds while respecting the bond they'd formed. Marcus grumbled about it, but he kept his word about not interfering. Elena sometimes sent referrals, women fleeing abusive partners who needed someone to help them disappear safely. Celine worked those cases for free, using the money her mother contributed to fund safe houses and legal assistance. A year after everything fell apart, Celine stood in her office late one evening, reviewing case files and sipping coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. New client coming your way. Scared college student, professor making threats. Sounds familiar? It did sound familiar. It would probably always sound familiar because men like Julian existed everywhere, using power and fear to control people they saw as beneath them. But now there was Celine, watching from the shadows, seeing what others missed, helping people find their way out before it was too late. She typed back, "Send her over tomorrow. I'll make time." Another buzz, this time from Damien. "Dinner this week? There's someone I want you to meet, another survivor doing good work. Think you'd connect?" "Sure. Thursday?" "Perfect." Celine set down her phone, looked out at the city lights beyond her window. Somewhere out there, people were trapped in situations that felt impossible. Somewhere out there, women were being told they didn't matter, that their voices weren't worth hearing, that obedience was safer than autonomy. She couldn't save them all, couldn't undo the systems that created these traps, couldn't single-handedly dismantle the structures of power that treated people as property. But she could help.
One person at a time, one careful observation at a time, one escape plan at a time. The frightened bride in the ruined wedding dress would have thought that wasn't enough. But the woman Celine had become knew better. Sometimes saving one person was everything. Sometimes it was enough to be the voice that said, "I believe you. I see what's happening. You're not alone." Sometimes it was enough to survive and then to help others do the same. Celine gathered her files, locked her office, and walked out into the night. She had dinner plans with her parents tomorrow, still trying, to build something honest from the wreckage of what they'd been. She had training with Rachel on Wednesday. She had coffee with Damien on Thursday. She had a life that was messy and complicated and entirely her own. And for the girl who'd spent 23 years being what everyone else wanted, that was more than enough. It was everything.